Proverbs 17. Proverbs 17. Actually, I have a marker here. Here we go. Keep that open. So it's going to be 28 verses. So we'll read this and then have some commentary, and got about 5 or 6 things to look at. So Proverbs 17, verse 1. Better a dry morsel and tranquility with it than a house full of feasting with strife. A slave who acts insightfully will rule over a son who acts shamefully, and will share in the inheritance among brothers. The refining pot is for silver and the furnace for gold, but Yahweh tests the hearts. An evildoer gives heed to the lips of wickedness. A liar gives ear to a destructive tongue. He who mocks the poor reproaches his maker, and he who is glad at disaster will not go unpunished. Grandchildren are the crown of old men, and the beauty of sons is their fathers. Excellent lips are not fitting for a wicked fool, even less are lying lips for a noble man. A bribe is a charm in the eyes of its owner. Wherever he turns, he prospers. He who covers a transgression seeks love, but he who repeats a matter separates close companions. A rebuke goes deeper into one who understands than 100 blows into a fool. A rebellious man seeks only evil, so a cruel messenger will be sent against him. Let a man meet a bear robbed of her cubs rather than a fool in his folly. He who returns evil for good, evil will not depart from his house. The beginning of strife is like the letting out of water, so abandon the dispute before it breaks out. He who justifies the wicked and he who condemns the righteous, both of them are like an abomination to Yahweh. Why is there a price in the hand of a fool to acquire wisdom when he has no heart of wisdom? A friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity. A man lacking a heart of wisdom strikes his hands in a pledge and becomes a guarantor of in the presence of his neighbor. He who loves transgression loves quarreling, and he who makes his doorway high seeks destruction. He who has a crooked heart finds no good, and he who is perverted in his tongue falls into evil. He who begets a fool does so to his grief, and a father of a wicked fool is not glad. A glad heart is good medicine, but a broken spirit dries up the bones. A wicked man receives a bribe from the bosom to thrust aside the paths of justice. Wisdom is in the presence of the one who understands, but the eyes of a fool are on the ends of the earth. A foolish son is a vexation to his father, and bitterness to her who gave birth to him. It is not good to punish the righteous, nor to strike the noble for their uprightness. He who holds back his words has knowledge, and he who has a cool spirit is a man of discernment. Even an ignorant fool, when he keeps silent, is considered wise. But when he closes his lips, it is considered understanding. That's it. So, Proverbs 17, again, just by way of review, what I try to do is pick out some themes that sometimes we skip things that we'll come back to, and we'll see that today, some things that we have skipped that we're coming back to today. There are lots of things that we could talk about here. Almost every chapter has something about lips, the tongue. We've talked about that on a couple of occasions already, and so I'm not gonna repeat that stuff. But you notice in there's a couple of verses in there about the mouth, the lips, how we speak, what we say, when we say what we say. That part there at the end, that's almost verbatim the modern proverb. Better to be thought of as a fool than to what? Talk. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, open your mouth and confirm or remove all suspicion. Yeah. Right? That's another one I've heard it said that way too. An ignorant fool, even when he keeps silence, considered wise. When he closes his lips, he is considered understanding. So that's there. Let me see here. That's all I really want to talk about with that. So today, let me see. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, about 5 or 6 different things here I want to get over or get through. Verse 1 is this theme, or theme is not really the right word, but the paradigm that we've seen last week or 2 weeks ago in chapter 16. Better a dry morsel with tranquility in it than a house full of feasting or strife. So it's this idea that something is better than something else, and it's counterintuitive. Okay, so if you look back in 16:8, better a little with righteousness than great produce with injustice. 16:16, how much better it is to acquire wisdom than gold, and to acquire understanding is to be chosen over silver. So you think that money is what you want, but what's really valuable is what? Wisdom. Wisdom is more valuable, which is, again, one of those repeated lessons throughout the book of Proverbs. Verse 16:19, it is better to be humble in spirit with the lowly than to divide the spoil with the proud. Now that one's really counterintuitive. Man, I want the spoil. I don't want the morsels, right? I don't want the crumbs. And yet, Proverbs says that it's better because of the audience you may have to associate yourself with to get it. It's better to be with people who are humble than to be than with people who are arrogant. So back to 17:1, better a dry morsel and tranquility with it than a full house of feasting with strife. Having a little financially and things being calm and cool is to be preferred over having a lot with conflict and discord. In other words, peace is better than money. Wisdom is better than money and riches, and peace is better than money and riches. People will spend a ton of money trying to get things right with other people, trying to fix relationships, sometimes even trying to buy relationships, and that's one of the things we'll talk about with bribery. Even if you think about people that have addiction problems that go to rehab and stuff like that, like the idea, which would you rather have? A whole bunch of money that you end up having to give to somebody else to fix some problems, or would you rather have things to go be pleasing? That's the idea there. So if you have a choice, this is a hard discussion sometimes that I've had to have with guys, especially if a guy's ambitious or something like that. He wants more. He wants to do well financially, and that's nothing wrong with that. And we say yes and amen as long as that's not like some selfish gain kind of thing. But the problem comes when they're willing to, when they're plowing so hard forward that they miss what really matters in life. You probably heard the old adage, right? There are no U-Hauls in heaven, right? There's no U-Haul behind the hearse, right? You can't take it with you kind of thing. You work, you do all these things to make money only to have what? Discord and problems, and if you ostracize your family, you lose your relationships in the process. If it turns you into somebody with misplaced values, it's not worth it. It's really not. And there are even times where you may find situations, you may find yourself in a spot where somebody's offering you more money, but is that money going to be worth the cost? It might be, and there may be a time for that. Again, wisdom bears this out. You have to figure this out. But I know guys who have taken on responsibilities that just meant, one option may be travel, where they've got to be gone all the time. I did that for about 4 years, and I swore I'd never do it, and I did it. And I'll tell you that there are some things that are just not worth it. What you miss with your family, with your kids, for my own mental health, quite honestly, the problem was more me than it was them. It just wasn't worth it. I've had situations where people, you probably have had this situation too. Somebody comes along and they say, hey, you might be good for this job and we'll pay you X, Y, or Z or something like that. One of the things you have to factor in is it's not just about the dollars, is it? It's about the work environment. It's about your lifestyle. What's this going to do? Where is it going to make it? Where do we have to go? What do I have to do? What stress level do I have to? What's the old saying? More money?
More problems.
More problems, right? That's kind of what's being said here in some sense. Having a little financially with calmness is to be preferred over having a lot with conflict and discord. Peace is better than money. Moving on to the next subject here, and it's the subject of offspring or sons, is how the author of Proverbs talks about it. So verse 2, a slave who acts insightfully will rule over a son who acts shamefully and will share in the inheritance among brothers. So sons, biblically, have a right to the inheritance that the father would give, and the Bible says that a wise man leaves an inheritance to his sons and his sons' sons. That's a good thing. And yet, sons can forfeit their inheritance. How?
Being idiots.
Yeah, acting a fool by being, well, I can't say that. So, not making poor decisions. They can be replaced by surrogates. Who's the surrogate?
In this case, the slave or the servant.
Yeah, the faithful slave or servant. The underdog, the guy who positionally and lawfully does not have a right to the position, but earns it through his faithfulness, earns it through his trustworthiness and work ethic and his character. And so the son is replaced by a slave and given. Notice what else the slave gets. The last part of verse 2, and he will share in the inheritance among brothers. Take from this one and give to that one. Does that sound familiar to you? To him who is given much, much will be required. Jesus gives this parable about he gives out certain amounts of talents to people, and one of the guys buries it instead of investing it, instead of doing well with it. And what does he say? Take it away from him and give it to somebody else. Give it to somebody who's faithful. It's a bad idea to do that from a top-down structure on a governmental side of things, but it's a good idea if you've got idiot kids. Don't reward that. And I suspect there maybe even be some of us in this room who have been the faithful slave, who have gotten on some level the inheritance of that somebody else probably should have gotten because the son was a moron, the son was an idiot. And you show up and you make, what do we call it? When you make a hand, right? You make a hand, and some guy looks at that and says, let's give that guy some more responsibility. He's doing well. And so what you want to do is create faithful sons for yourself and be a faithful son. But the point of the proverb is what? Faithfulness, being truthful, being a man of character, pays dividends. It pays dividends, and sometimes you get this situation, and that's an act of justice. It's a good thing. It's a good thing when that's rewarded. We'll see the opposite of that here in a minute. Verse 6. So still talking about the idea of sons. Grandchildren are the crown of old men, and the beauty of sons is their father. Old men love to talk about the grandchildren, right? You got granddad. He's glad. Used to back in the day, we carried pictures in our wallet. You remember those days? And everybody had one of those little clear plastic things that turned yellow over time and fell apart. You have to get a new one every 2 or 3 years.
Or the accordion that's like 100 foot long.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Nowadays, we've got our phones, and you do that. And you can watch guys light up sometimes when they want to talk about their grandkids. And they just, they light up. Grandchildren are the crown of old men. They're proud of them. Man, look at this kid. Look at him. Look at her. Old men love to talk about grandchildren. They make him proud. Likewise, boys naturally look up to and admire their dads. What'd you say out on the playground when you and your buddy were talking about your dad? What'd you say, Ryan?
My dad can beat your dad.
That's right. That's right. Every proud son should say that. That's right and good. Right? So the beauty of sons is their fathers. Dad's 10 foot tall and bulletproof. I remember one time when my kids finally realized that I'm not a trampoline. Right? Mm-hmm. You coming down with that elbow smash on my leg is not like, let's not do that. Okay, that hurts.
On your couch.
Yeah.
You can only bluff them for so long.
Yeah. So it's this idea that the implication is twofold. One, that we want to raise up godly sons who produce godly grandsons. You want to be proud of your kids and your grandkids. You want to create that generational tie, and to be able to have that as an experience. It's a badge of pride, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing. Have a legacy of faithfulness. That ought to be a goal, something you're working towards. 2, be a respectable and an admirable man. Be a man that indeed your kids are not let down by. Don't disappoint your kids. I'll tell you that's a driving factor for me. It's a very powerful motivator when I think about the decisions I make, that they affect my kids. Don't forfeit your inheritance as one with influence by letting them down. Don't forfeit what you have by letting them down and showing yourself as a man who doesn't have character. Verse 21. He who begets a fool does so to his grief, and the father of a wicked fool is not glad. This is a harsh one, right? Sons have the ability to make their parents proud or disappointed, glad or regretful. Another way of thinking about this is to say that our sin, or conversely our faithfulness, doesn't just affect us. That our decisions impact others around us, and they impact those closest to us the most. So proximity matters. When I make a bad decision, when I do something dumb, it brings reproach not just on me, but on my wife, my kids, my parents, and of course, you want to raise kids. When you're thinking about, so there's 2 sides of this, all right? If you're a dad, you're thinking about it as a dad. You don't want kids that let you down and disappoint you. One of the ways that you can do that is by thinking through and being intentional as a parent. There are some things that are not optional. For us, it was brushing your teeth, doing your work, taking care of your business, going to church, being involved. But ultimately, it wasn't just those activities, but it was, we love the truth, love God, love your family. Like, your affections really, really matter. What you are enamored with, what captures your heart, and that's really what you're after with your kids. I would encourage you strongly, go easy on rules, but hard on principles. Easy on rules. Rules come and go. God has rules, and those things are set in stone. But everything else, it's really about the principle. What is at the heart of this? There were some things that were hard and fast. You lie to us, brother, there's going to be hell to pay. You steal something, we're coming down like a ton of bricks. But again, the reason for that is because God is a God of truth. And God is sovereign, and He hands out to people what He thinks they should have. You do not get to decide that. You don't get to steal. You don't get to tell untruths. You work hard, not because Dad's going to come down on you if you don't, but because God has given you a mind and a body, and you need to be His guy. You need to be His woman. So this idea, verse 21, he who begets a fool does so to his grief. How many parents, I cannot count the amount of parents I've talked to that are just absolutely heartbroken because of how their kids turn out. There are no guarantees in life. You can do everything right and still have knucklehead kids. That happens. But what you can do is stack the odds. And that's what you want to do. You want to raise thoroughbreds. You want to raise kids who, in our 33 series, there was a guy, he said, rules without relationship leads to rebellion. Rules without relationship leads to rebellion. That doesn't mean that you don't have rules. Doesn't mean that you don't have things that matter. But the relationship's got to be primary. The rules are secondary. Principles. Our rules were basically simple. It was love God and do everything that you're supposed to do. Don't do anything you're not supposed to do. And if there's any question about it, ask or just don't do it. Those were pretty much the 4 things. That covered bedtime, meals, taking care of your clothes, all the rest of that stuff, okay? The other side of this, we're all sons in this room. If you've got parents that are still alive, and I know some of you don't, some of us don't, but if you've got a parent or parents that are still alive, I would encourage you to obey, think about, and obey the commandment. What's the commandment?
Honor.
Honor your father and your mother, even if you disagree with them. And you may have vehement disagreements. That does not negate the command to honor them. You can disagree in an honorable way. And it may be that you just don't talk a lot about that kind of stuff. You don't, by the way, have to convert all your parents to postmillennial Presbyterianism and whatever. Don't do that, right? Honor them. Let them have, if they want to be dispensational and have their views and whatever, let it go. Okay? Let it go. Honor them. Honor them. What does it mean to honor somebody? Respect them. Treat them with respect. Listen, even when you want to roll your eyes. One of the big things that older people want is they just want somebody to listen to their stories. I want them to listen. And those things are meaningful. Those are their experiences. And there's wisdom to be found in that. Sometimes that wisdom is what not to do. Sometimes, and you may have heard that. How many times have you heard that story? Right? Here we go again. Right? Yeah, I've heard that one. All right, here we go again. Listen to them. Honor them. So be a respectable son. He who begets a fool does so to his grief. A father of a wicked fool is not glad. Don't be a fool. Make wise decisions. Make your parents proud. Their face should light up when they talk about you. When they think about you, one of the ways you can honor them is honoring ultimately God, your Father, and making good decisions. And if I know sometimes that causes division, it can. And threading that needle is hard. It's hard to walk that line sometimes, especially if you have parents who are either unbelievers or nominal, or they themselves have forfeited their own respectability. That's a very tough thing to deal with, right? When you've got parents who forfeited their respectability by their decisions or something like that. And maybe in the natural man, you don't respect them or something like that. We're still called to honor them. Another thing that I would just tell you to do, this is actually later in my notes, but I'll go ahead and say it now because we're on this topic. If you have a parent that is still alive, or parents that are still alive, you need to contact and visit them on the regularly. I, for many, many years, did not do a very good job of this. And I have, within the last little bit, year or two or something like that, I've made an effort to do better. And what the realization that I had was when we sent Jet off to school, all the other rules applied and stuff like that. And because we're funding things, we still, our parents, that's about to end. He's going to be off the payroll in May. Praise the Lord. But I told him, I said, son, call me anytime. You need something, we're good, and I want to visit with you, okay? But I don't have to have what I'm about to tell you with your mom. Call your mother on Sundays. Call your mother every Sunday. I don't care what else is going on. Put it on your calendar, and if you don't do it, you will receive a phone call from me. And 3 strikes and you're out. Things quit getting paid, right? Honor your father and your mother. If you have them still alive, I would encourage you to do that. Verse 25. Moving on. A foolish son is a vexation to his father and a bitterness to him who gave birth to him. Sons have the ability to cause grief, anger, disappointment to their parents, and it is a deeply painful wound for parents to endure. Perhaps you know or have experienced, or maybe this is very close to home. If you have somebody in your family that has addiction issues and you have to watch a parent deal with that, it's a hard thing, right? A foolish son is a vexation to his father. What do dads do when their kids mess up? Well, our natural response is to, what are you doing? Right? We get mad. We get angry. And that's not all bad. There's an anger to sin, but there's also a righteous anger. When your kids are making bad decisions and they're severe decisions, That's appropriate. So a foolish son is I love the word vexation. It's not a word that we use much. Do you have a different translation there?
Grief. Yeah.
Grief. Yeah. It can go either way. Anger, vexation is the idea of being physically upset. Grief, right, is a deep, heartfelt disappointment. This hurts my soul to see my son acting like this, to be like this. Bitterness to him who gave birth to him. Do y'all have a different translation than bitterness? Verse 25? Bitterness.
Bitterness to her who bore him.
To her, yeah. So mom, she's like, ugh, this kid, right? Nothing but pain and sorrow, right? Sounds like a hee-haw song or something. You want to raise faithful, solid children who you can be proud of, and of course, you yourself be that kind of guy. I've said my piece about contacting parents and doing that. Moving on from sons, let's talk about rebuke and wisdom. Verse 10. Verse 10. Turn back the page here. A rebuke goes deeper into one who understands than 100 blows to a fool. So let's do this in reverse order for a second. 100 blows. What's that?
Could be a lot of things, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know.
Spankings, I don't know.
Yeah. To a kid, it could be spankings. To a grown man, you have to remember in their culture, corporal punishment was still a thing. Not just for kids, but for adults. Like employers, slaves and masters and all that kind of stuff. Like you keep doing something dumb, right? You're going to keep getting beat, right? That's basically the idea. Excuse me. West Texas dust. So the idea of a beating or these blows, what is the goal of that? It's the taking out of the frustration. No, that's not the point, right? The point is to curb the behavior. I'm going to inflict this pain so that you will want the pain to stop and change your behavior. By the way, and that's what spankings. That's the goal, right? That's the goal is you're going to endure this temporary pain so that you don't have to endure some permanent pain later, choose the appropriate, response or the appropriate discipline for the kid, whatever is most pragmatic. Is the way we went with that. But notice the contrast that's given here. He who, where did I go? Verse 10, 17, there it is. A rebuke goes deeper into the one who understands than 100 blows to a fool. So 100 blows to a fool, and what does he do?
Same thing.
Yeah. As a dog returns to his vomit, so a fool to his folly. That's another proverb. He just keeps going back to the same thing. He keeps repeating oh, this hurts. I don't like it. Well, but then I'm going to go eat my vomit again, right? And it's just this constant cycle of starting over, doing the same thing, never getting anywhere. You beat on him, he does it again. He beat on him, he does it again. It's kind of like the dog that won't quit, killing cats. Stop killing cats. You jump the fence again, and we're going to beat you. Well, he keeps doing it. He says a rebuke goes deeper into the one who understands than 100 blows into a fool. What does a wise man do? Do you have to beat him? You don't have to even beat him. You don't have to beat him 100 times. You don't have to beat him at all. What do you have to do?
Rebuke.
What's a rebuke?
Correction.
Hey man, this is not good. I see you doing this. This is not okay. There's two sides of this. There's the giving of the rebuke. And we've talked about this before. Anytime you give a rebuke to somebody, you're taking a serious chance, aren't you, of severing the relationship, because they could just be like, piss off, like I'm out of here, leave me alone. Who do you think you are? And it turns into that whole thing. The flip side of it is that you want to also, well, let me finish that thought. You want to be willing to love somebody enough that if you see them in serious or gross sin, that you say something about it. You need to. I'm not saying walk around, machine gunning everybody that's out of line, right? That's a bad idea. It assumes probably a relationship and something like that. But the flip side of it is what? If somebody comes to you with something,
Receive it,
yeah,
be mature and ready for it.
that's it. Humble, mature. Yep, you're right. I messed up. This is not good. Thank you. Thank you for helping me. Right? That's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. You know, what do people do much of the time when somebody rebukes them?
Defense.
Yeah. What's that look like? What's that defense look like?
Anger.
Bribe. Justify it.
Yep. All that.
This, then that.
Yeah. Anger, justification, denial sometimes. That wasn't me. No, I didn't do that. Blame.
Shift the blame.
Shift the blame. Yeah. Oh, I've heard that this is one that I get a lot. Oh, you don't understand. You don't understand. Well, look, I don't have to take heroin to understand that that's a bad idea. Okay, it just is. It's just a bad idea. I don't have to walk in your shoes to know that those are bad shoes. Okay. Again, the flip side is when somebody comes to us with that, what does a wise man do? He takes it. He receives it. He doesn't fight. He doesn't get defensive. He owns it. He takes responsibility. He says, okay, yeah, you're right. A man of understanding. So, Proverbs 9:8 says this: do not reprove a scoffer lest he hate you, but if you reprove a wise man, he will love you.
What was that? Which one?
Proverbs 9:8.
Oh, 9.
9:8. Don't reprove a scoffer. So it's this idea that if you've got somebody that you know the response is going to be, hey man, screw you, leave me alone. Right? They're going to have this attitude.
Don't waste your breath.
Pearls before swine. You're wasting your time. Now, are you making two judgments there? Yeah, you're making a judgment first of all about their character, and secondly, you're making a judgment about their reaction. So,
But if you're willing to make that judgment, you should have enough wisdom to be able to discern whether you're going to be wasting your breath or not.
yeah, for me, there's been some trial and error in that. We'll see how this goes. You don't want to be overly confrontational with folks. You don't want to be the guy who's just out nitpicking everybody about stuff. We all know what Jesus says about taking the log out of your eye. Don't just, if you're cheating on your wife, don't go give a guy a hard time about breaking the speed limit. Okay, come on, dude. If you're lying on your, anyway, you get the idea. What's going on there? Bribery. So before we move on to this next one, any questions or comments about that one? Input, stories. Okay. Bribery. I don't have a lot to say about this one. I'm just going to read verse 8 and verse 23. It's kind of interesting how these two go together. It's two very different aspects of bribery. We all know what bribery is. Giving money or gifts to attain favor from somebody or something like that. So verse 8, bribery is a charm in the eyes of its owner. Wherever he turns, he prospers. What's that verse essentially saying? A bribe is a charm in the eyes of its owner. What does that mean? It's a charm. What does a charm do? Do you have a different translation?
Magic stone.
Magic stone?
It's a magic stone.
It's a magic stone, right? It does magic. Bribery, what does it do?
It blinds you.
Well, for the guy giving it, how does he think about it? What does it say here?
It's like the greatest thing since sliced bread.
Yeah, get you what you want. It's like magic. Okay? In the oil field, what do we call this? Kickbacks. Money under the table, kickbacks. All these. There's just they're in on the game. You're taking somebody's lunch money, I think is the phrase I've heard before. When it's you're greasing the wheels, you're priming the pump, all this kind of stuff. Is there an appropriate amount of what's the word I'm looking for? Hospitality that you can give to friends and people and stuff like that, and is that a good thing? Yeah, I think that's a good thing. Where does it turn aside? When it becomes your primary means and motive.
When it's a motive
of operation. Yeah, I'm buying this. I'm buying this favor. I'm buying this work. I'm buying this income or whatever. So a bribe is a charm in the eyes of something. Man, you got money, you can make more money, and you just keep doing this thing. Wherever he turns, he prospers. He does well. And I know for a fact that we could go around the table and talk about people that we know that is absolutely their story. Am I wrong about that? I've got people in mind that I could name. I'm not going to, but I'm sure you do too. So look at verse 23. A wicked man receives a bribe from the bosom to thrust aside the paths of justice. So bribery, ultimately, what is it? It's essentially injustice. It's a way of buying something that you don't deserve. You're using your money for undue influence. And it can be effective. Verse 8. It's also evil. It's evil. It's not right. It's not good. And if you receive it, God has some really harsh things to say about that, which we'll get to in a minute. Verse 17. Moving on to something else. This is similar to rebuke and wisdom. If I had a little more time to prep, I probably would have kind of put these two together. Verse 17, a friend, what does he do? Loves. How often?
All the time.
All the time, man. It's faithful love. This is probably what the Bible's talking about when the word phileo, it's the Greek word. It's brotherly love. City of Philadelphia is a city of brotherly love. The idea that, man, you got somebody, he's there. And a brother is born for adversity. I want to kill this guy. You're at odds with each other all the time. Proverbs 18:24. 18:24. If you flip over, this is obviously next week, but we'll go ahead and do it now. A man of too many friends comes to wisdom, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. A man who sticks closer than a brother. Ideally, your brother should be one of your closest friends. It should be one of your closest friends. You were raised in the same household. You should have the same values. You should have a lot of commonality, that kind of thing. But many times, because of foolishness, the relationship is distanced or even severed altogether. Sometimes friendships replace brotherhood because of shared values, right? Especially if you have people who are unbelievers versus believers or something like that. And I'll just tell you, we've talked about this before. You guys are my brothers. I don't have any physical brothers. This is my story. And it's not only because we have the same father, but we have the same values. And you want to associate with POUs, people like us. That's what you want to do. You choose your friends don't choose you. And you choose to be in a relationship and have community and brotherhood and do family together. And that's a big part of what church is. So much so that in the New Testament they even called each other brothers. The brethren, yeah. They even called each other brothers. That's emblematic of the New Testament idea of the relationship between people of shared values. So 17, a friend loves at all times, but a brother is born for adversity. I would tell you this as well. So pick your friends don't choose you. Know what your values are. You've heard me say this 100 times. Faith, family, friends, forward movement, fitness, finance, freedom, and fun. I write them on cups and hand them out to kids and all kinds of stuff. It's a paradigm for how they are to choose their friends and pick people that they're going to associate with when they're out of our households. That's the idea. Pick your friends. And at the same time, the flip side of that is that if you want good friends, you need to
Be a good friend.
That's it. Yeah, be a good friend. Be faithful. Be somebody people can count on. Be the guy that when somebody says, man, things are tough or whatever, right? That you're the face that they're looking to. You're the number that's in their head. Let's look at this will be a little heavy. Verse 3. Let's see how we're doing on time. Yeah, we got to go quick on this. Verse 3. The refining pot is for silver and the furnace for gold, but Yahweh tests the hearts. So what's the first part of the verse? Refining pot is for silver and the furnace for gold. What's a refining pot? Furnace?
My translation says crucible.
Crucible, yeah.
One way impurities.
Yeah. You take a rock and you stick it in the furnace and it heats it up. You might even press it, but usually a crucible, you're superheating it to the point that it becomes liquid. And what happens?
Separates the gold from the impurities.
Yeah, the dross floats up, you scrape it away, and then you're left with the good stuff, right? But in order to get there, to get the separation, what do you have to have?
A lot of heat.
A lot of pain and torture, right? A lot of heat. So the idea is this. We understand this with precious metals. To get it to a point of usefulness and purity, it has to go through the furnace. Likewise, verse 3, Yahweh tests the hearts. What does this mean? The idea that God just wants you to be happy, healthy, and rich. That's not true. Not according to this verse, anyway.
And not according to about two others.
Yeah, like
Just in this
take up
chapter
your
alone.
take up your cross and follow me. That's one that comes to mind real fast. That doesn't mean that we're curmudgeons and we're just dour and all this kind of stuff. But there is this understanding that God sometimes, in fact, He absolutely will. I mean, you can just count on this. This is going to happen. If it hasn't happened, it will happen. And if it's happened, it's probably going to happen again. And we have absolutely no control over it, but He is going to intentionally send hardship your way. And it's not because He hates you. It's not because He is mean. It's not because He's vindictive. Bad things happen for at least three reasons. The number one reason is that we live in a fallen world that's screwed up, and sometimes bad stuff just happens. It's just out there, okay? Sometimes bad things happen because we make dumb decisions. I've used this illustration 100 times. Go out and play out in the middle of the highway. Don't be surprised if you get hit by a truck. You make dumb decisions, there are consequences. What a man sows, that shall he reap. That's Galatians 6:7. All right. If you plant apples out in an apple tree, you get apples. If you sow weeds, you get weeds. If you make bad decisions, bad things are going to happen, and there are consequences to that. By the way, that's one of the big jobs of parenting. But there is a third category of this. So anytime something bad's happen, you need to ask yourself, is this just something, things just happen like this. No one can foresee this. Sometimes people get sick. They get the big C. They get whatever, cancer. There are some things you might be able to do to prevent some of that. But sometimes it just happens. You can't control it. And does that mean that God is up in heaven just, what is He doing? This is one of the hardest truths that I know to be able to swallow. He is more concerned about our character than He is our circumstances. And I hate that. I do. I hate it. I don't like it. It frustrates me. He is more concerned about our character, and He will do whatever is necessary to shape us and mold us into the image of Christ because He loves us that much. Even if that means putting us through hardship and difficulty. Boy, it's hard to believe that when you lose your job. It's hard to believe that when somebody gets sick. It's hard to believe that when somebody dies. It is gut-wrenching sometimes to endure that. Turn with me over to James chapter 1. We've said many times that the book of James is kind of the closest thing that we have to New Testament Proverbs. Today's no exception. James chapter 1. Verse 2. Consider it all, what? Joy, my brothers, when you encounter various, what? Trials or testings. Knowing that the testing of your faith produces or brings about perseverance. And let perseverance have its perfect work, so that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. Verse 5. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all generously without reproach, and it will be given to him. And he goes on to talk about how he must be consistent and how he does that, not double-minded. See, this is a perspective change. There's other verses we could go to in Romans 8 in particular, that have to do with this same idea. God tests men. We are led astray by our temptations sometimes, but he creates tests and puts us intentionally in difficulty. And this flies all in the face of the health and wealth gospel. Okay? And he does it because he's a good father and he loves us and he wants us to be strong. He is forming us. James tells us to consider it joy, and this is definitely an act of faith and something that is completely foreign to the natural man who only looks at the present and the temporal. This is it's a tough pill to swallow. Verse 15, talking about, back to Proverbs 17:15, talking about what God does, what Yahweh does. He who justifies the wicked and he who condemns the righteous, both of them are alike. Both of them alike are an abomination to Yahweh. Anybody have a different translation on that?
I said, the Lord detests them both.
He detests them. I think it's safe to say God hates when justice is called injustice, when evil is called good, and when good is called evil. Does this sound familiar to anybody? What's going on in our world? We have whole situations and phrases that are turned upside down with this stuff. Flip over with me real quick to Isaiah 5. Isaiah 5. Turn around. 1, 2, 4. Ooh, I said left. It's right. What am I thinking? Isaiah 5:20. Jesus uses this as a pattern for what he does in Matthew chapter 23, which I would love to talk about, but we don't have time for that. But Isaiah 5:20. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, and substitute darkness for light and light for darkness, substitute bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. Woe to those who are wise in their own eyes and understanding in their own sight. Woe to those who are mighty men in drinking wine and valiant men in mixing strong drink, who declare the wicked righteous for a bribe and remove the righteous standing of the ones who are righteous. Therefore, as a tongue of fire consumes stubble and a dry grass collapses into flame, so their root will become like rot and their blossom will blow away as the dust. For they have rejected the law of Yahweh of hosts and the word of the Holy One of Israel they have spurned. On account of this, the anger of Yahweh has burned against his people. He has stretched out his hand against them and struck them down, and the mountains trembled, and their corpses lay like refuse in the middle of the streets. For all his anger is not turned back, and his hand is still stretched out. Of course, this is talking about the destruction of Judea and what happened. But what happened? They turned everything upside down. They perverted justice. They called evil good and good evil. And what does it say about that?
God struck them down.
Yeah, it's an abomination. He hates it. He detests it. He hates wickedness. He hates injustice. And it's not an uncommon thing. I just picked that particular one because it talks about... did you see some common themes there?
Yeah, quit the guilty for a bribe.
Bribe, yeah. Talks about the mouth and the tongue and lying. What does he say? It's the same language that James uses about the tongue being a flame. It's very, very similar how the Bible kind of weaves this story and this tapestry on top of each other, right? And these fat pieces of fabric go together. He hates it. Perversion of good and evil, being wise in one's own eyes, overindulgence in alcohol, bribery, the tongue. These are all themes that are repeated just in Proverbs 7. And what does he say? When that type of behavior is normal, they've rejected God, and the outcome is judgment. 100% of the time, it's always judgment. It's judgment on a people, it's judgment on a family, and it's judgment on individuals. You can take it to the bank. Nation. That's right. That's right. So, let's conclude on a little lighter note. Everybody's like, whew, that's bad. I need to go repent, right? Verse 12. These are just a couple of memorable ones that kind of funny a little bit. Let a man meet a she-bear. I like the translation that says she-bear. If you've got the ESV, I think that's what it says. A she-bear. Let a man meet a she-bear robbed of her cubs rather than a fool in his folly. It sounds funny, but there's actually a real sobering truth in this. What is it?
Rather go wrestle a bear than deal with an idiot.
Yeah. So the implication is what?
Don't deal with idiots.
Yeah. Avoid them. Stay away from people who make... Now, who is it? Be careful here. First of all, you got to be careful that you're not the idiot. That you're not the fool. Right? That's number one. Okay, number two, don't go to places where idiots associate. I can think of a few, right? You know what I'm talking about.
There's kind of a warning, like when you deal with fools, be on the lookout for getting tangled up in their folly.
That's right.
You have a chance, to get when you recognize that, to make a decision, right?
Yeah.
Don't answer a fool according to his folly, but answer a fool according to his folly.
Yeah. The idea that you want to be an influencer instead of an influencee. What normally happens? Well, when you get down in the quicksand with a bunch of idiots, you're not on stable ground. Even though you may be strong, you still can't get out. That's just not the way it works. The risk of being mauled by a mama bear is less than being associated with a fool. Avoid contact with fools. Stay away from where they congregate and separate yourself from their presidents with prejudice. With prejudice. Employ the Irish goodbye when encountering fools. Keep your distance and disassociate yourself from idiots. Don't be afraid just to leave. Just get up and go. Verse 22, this is what we'll end on. This is one that many people have memorized. A glad heart is good medicine, but a broken spirit dries up the bones. Guys, laughter is a good thing. If you've got conflict in your marriage, if you've got conflict with people, if you can go easy on some things and you can make light of some things, do that in a respectful way. Having a sense of humor, an appropriate sense of humor, okay, is a good thing. It's been said the first thing to go in a marriage when things turn bad is laughter. You quit laughing together. You quit smiling. One of the best things that you can do when things are bad is literally take a step back and smile. And if you can think of something funny to say it. Laughter is good medicine. It's therapeutic. It's good. Have an appropriate sense of humor. Conversely, a broken, crushed, downtrodden attitude creates fragile relationships and is burdensome. It's the phrase "drying up of the bones" is like a euphemism for depression. You just decay away. So make yourself do it for the sake of your bride, for the sake of your relationships. Direct it toward yourself if possible. The humor. Don't direct it towards her. Don't make fun of her. Right? You poke fun at yourself. Right. And you'll be surprised, I think, at how that problems tend to kind of start to dissipate and evaporate when you can just be like, I really thought that running my head into the wall would be a good idea. You can make light of it. It's a good thing. Father, help us to walk in faithfulness and wisdom. Let us be men of respectability and truth. Let us indeed be the kind of men you delight in. May we be men who understand the times and circumstances that we find ourselves in, even if that's difficulty and pain. Give us perspective and faith when we go through those difficulties, and we invite your Spirit to lead us and teach us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.